40 years of hardship searching for the missing daughter, a miracle happened just before passing away. Helen was a woman once admired by the entire neighborhood for her strength, independence, and kind heart. But time did not heal the wounds in her heart, especially the unending pain of the greatest loss of her life, her daughter Emily. The little girl disappeared on a sunny afternoon, and from that moment, Helen's world seemed to collapse. Since that day, she has lived in an uncertain journey, struggling with the pain while clinging to the fragile hope that one day Emily will return. But the harsh reality crushed every little bit of hope. Every time news about Emily turned out to be a dead end, every time the door of hope slammed shut, Helen felt as if the whole world was turning its back on her. In Helen's hands, there is always a small treasure, a faded photograph of Emily taken on her 5th birthday. In the photo, Emily is smiling brightly, her eyes sparkling with joy, and her hair tied on both sides, blowing in the wind. That was the last happy moment Helen held on to before everything fell apart. The photo had faded, the corners of the paper were beginning to tear, but Helen still cherished it as if it were the only thing keeping her connected to Emily. Every night before closing her eyes, she gazed at the photo for a long time, her eyes filled with sorrow, never leaving her daughter's face. "Where are you now, Emily? Do you still remember your mother?" The silent questions kept echoing in her mind, haunting her to the point of breathlessness. In her final days, Helen had no one by her side except for the cold 4 walls of the nursing home. Here, people only see her as a difficult old woman, always silent and distant from everyone. But no one knows that behind that cold exterior, Helen's heart is being suffocated by lingering pain and an unquenchable regret. Helen's entire life was just a series of days spent living in tattered memories and fading hope. She didn't dare to share her story for fear that no one would understand that pain. But deep within her soul, Helen still longed to be heard, to have someone share in the burden of the suffering she had endured for too long. Some nights, Helen sat silently by the window, the pale moonlight casting shadows on her face, etched with the marks of time. Her bony hand gently touched the photograph as if trying to reach Emily, even if only in imagination. In each of those moments, her tears fell silently, not loudly, not dramatically, just the dwindling drops of a heart that had endured too much loss. And so Helen continued to wait, even though her heart knew that this wait might never be answered. One chilly morning, Sarah, a young nurse with bright eyes and a warm smile, stepped into the nursing home. This is her first day taking on the task of caring for the elderly here. In the dreary atmosphere of the nursing home, Sarah quickly noticed something unusual. Among the elderly who often chatted animatedly, Helen was the only one who always maintained a distant demeanor, retreating into the corner of the room. What attracted Sarah the most was the way Helen always clutched a small, worn-out photo every evening, her eyes deep in thought. At first, Sarah only observed Helen from a distance. She sensed a deep sadness emanating from the frail figure of the old woman. While the other staff usually see Helen as an unfriendly person, Sarah saw something different. Behind that cold exterior, there was surely a forgotten story, a pain that no one had the patience to understand. One day, when it was time to distribute the evening medication, Sarah tried to strike up a conversation with Helen. The old lady only responded with a cold glance. Not a word was spoken. Sarah did not lose heart. She continued the conversation in a gentle tone, asking simple questions about her health and complimenting the blue wool scarf that Helen often draped over her shoulders. Helen didn't respond, but Sarah noticed that the old woman's gaze was no longer so distant. Day by day, Sarah continued to persevere. She was not in a hurry, nor did she force Helen to answer her. Instead, she chose to quietly appear beside her, taking care of her with small gestures, bringing a cup of hot tea on cold mornings, helping Helen adjust her chair by the window to make her more comfortable, or simply sitting quietly beside her without saying a word. One afternoon, in the gentle sunlight streaming through the window, Sarah suddenly noticed Helen holding a small photograph, her eyes fixed on it but her face heavy with sorrow. Sarah gently sat down next to her, not wanting to startle her. After a moment, she spoke gently. "This photo is so beautiful. Is this someone very important to you?" Helen was silent for a long time, as if she were considering something. Finally, she spoke in a hoarse voice, so soft that Sarah had to listen very carefully to hear. "It's my daughter, Emily." That was the first time Helen spoke about the photo, and the first time she talked about Emily after so many years of silence. Sarah felt the tremor in her voice, as if the memories that had been suppressed for too long were now surging forth, both painful and yearning to be shared. From that moment, the relationship between Helen and Sarah began to change. Although Helen remained somewhat reserved, she gradually allowed Sarah to step into her world. Every day, the two of them spent a little more time talking. Sarah not only listened to Helen's story, but also brought her comfort with the sincerity and warmth that Helen had been missing for so long. Sarah did not know that she was also writing a new chapter in Helen's life, a chapter where pain was no longer the only thing filling it, but instead the light of empathy and rekindled hope. That night, it rained heavily, the raindrops falling heavily on the tin roof and glass windows, creating a quiet, sorrowful melody that echoed throughout the nursing home. Helen sat by the window, her eyes gazing intently into the vast dark sky, where lightning suddenly flashed. Sarah brought a cup of hot tea, gently placed it on the table near Helen, and then sat down beside her. Helen was silent for a long time, as if listening to the rain recount something from the past. Suddenly she spoke, her voice soft yet full of emotion. "A rainy night like this always reminds me of that day, the day I lost Emily." Sarah looked up, her gentle eyes gazing at the old woman. Without saying a word, she quietly placed her hand on Helen's hand, as if to convey an invisible comfort. That gesture seemed to give Helen a boost of courage. She began to recount, word by word, as if the memories that had been imprisoned for too long were finally being set free. That day, the weather was beautiful, Helen said, her voice choked, her eyes clouded as if lost in deep memories. Emily wore the yellow dress that I made for her myself. The girl really liked that dress. She kept spinning around, giggling, saying that she looked like a little princess. Helen took a deep breath, but her voice was still trembling. "We were at the park, laughing and playing tag. I remember I even turned to smile at it, seeing its eyes sparkling. But then, I just let my guard down a little, just a little bit, and when I turned back, Emily was no longer there." Helen's hand clutched Emily's photo tightly, her eyes reddened, tears streaming down her face, which was already marked by the passage of time. I searched everywhere, calling its name until my voice was hoarse. But Emily, the girl has disappeared, as if swept away by some wind. Sarah was stunned into silence. Helen's stories were full of pain and haunting details, but what made Sarah's heart ache was the detail about Emily's yellow dress and radiant smile. That was the image Sarah had heard about from the foster family of the girl they had adopted many years ago. Memories suddenly flooded back to Sarah. When she was little, her parents had told her that they had adopted an abandoned girl with no information about her family. That girl always harbored a vague fear, but often mentioned the yellow dress and mother. The girl was given a new name, and now Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Helen might be the mother who lost her child that day. However, Sarah did not dare to quickly say what she thought. She was afraid that if she was wrong, it would only hurt Helen again. Instead, she listened to her grandmother's entire story, each word filled with love and regret. In Sarah's heart, a flicker of hope appeared, that perhaps this meeting was not just a random coincidence, but a piece of destiny finding its way back to its rightful place. The days after that rainy evening, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Helen's story. In her mind, the details about the yellow dress and the name Emily kept repeating. Every time she saw Helen holding the old photo, Sarah became more curious, because the girl in the picture looked very familiar, but she couldn't explain why. One day, when Helen dozed off after dinner, Sarah slowly walked over to her table. Emily's photo was still neatly placed, one corner slightly torn by time. Sarah picked up the photo and looked at it more closely. Immediately, she noticed something surprising. The girl in the photo had a face very similar to the childhood pictures her adoptive family had shown her. Every feature, from the eyes to the innocent smile, seemed to reflect the image of her own childhood. Sarah felt her heart beating faster. She tried to stay calm and decided to ask Helen more about what she still kept from Emily. One morning, when Helen seemed more at ease than usual, Sarah gently asked, "Mrs. Helen, besides this photo, do you have anything else about Emily? Is there any special keepsake that she used to love?" Helen was silent for a moment, as if reminiscing. Then she slowly replied, "Emily, the girl has a necklace. I gave it to her on her 5th birthday. The bracelet has the name Emily engraved on it. I remember when she received the gift, she was so happy that she hugged me tightly and kept wearing it without taking it off." Sarah heard this, and it felt as if the entire world around her suddenly fell silent. Her hand unconsciously touched the necklace she had worn since she was a child. It was a simple silver necklace, old but still intact, with the meticulously engraved name, Emily. Sarah recalled what her foster parents had said. This ring was the only thing she had when she was brought to the orphanage. They didn't know its origin, only saying that it was her most precious keepsake. When Helen got to this point, Sarah couldn't hide her confusion. She looked at Helen, her eyes a mix of astonishment and skepticism, but she didn't dare say anything. The details Helen recounted matched up to an unbelievable extent. Could this necklace belong to Emily? And if so, what does it mean for her? In the days that followed, Sarah fell into a fierce inner conflict. She felt her heart being pulled in two opposite directions. A part of her wanted to believe that Helen was the biological mother she had always longed to find, but another part feared that if the truth was not as such, both she and Helen would have to endure an irreparable pain. Every time she looked at the necklace in her hand, Sarah felt an indescribable surge of emotions. The necklace was no longer just an inanimate object. It seemed to be whispering to her about a forgotten past, a faint yet intense connection between her and Helen. Finally, Sarah decided that she could not let this question remain a mystery forever. She began to delve deeper into her past. She went through the adoption papers, asking her adoptive parents about the time she was brought into the family. Through the scant documents, Sarah discovered a piece of information that left her stunned. She had been adopted from a small orphanage at the exact time Helen lost her child. Not stopping there, Sarah decided to contact the former staff at the orphanage, those who might still remember that time. After many inquiries and searches, she found a name in the old records, Emily. That name was right on the timeline, matching the story Helen told. The clues are gradually becoming clearer, but they also make Sarah feel a mix of anxiety and expectation. Is this the truth that both she and Helen have been searching for all this time? She knew she was getting closer to the answer, but she couldn't help but feel fear when thinking about the final outcome. After days of struggling with herself, Sarah decided she could no longer delay. She needed to tell Helen about what she had discovered. On a quiet afternoon, as the sunlight faded on the window frame of the nursing home, Sarah sat down next to Helen. The old lady, as usual, was gazing out into the distance, the photo of Emily still clutched in her hand. Sarah gently called out, "Mrs. Helen, I have something to tell you." Helen turned back, her eyes a mix of confusion and fatigue. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as she took the necklace out of her pocket. She carefully placed it in the palm of Helen's hand and said, "Do you recognize this necklace?" Helen was momentarily taken aback. Her gaze slowly lowered, looking at the necklace. She picked it up, her bony hands trembling as they traced every detail. At first, Helen seemed unable to believe her eyes. She shook her head gently, as if telling herself that this was just a coincidence or a mistake. "No, it can't be." Her voice faltered, both fearful and choked with emotion. How did this bracelet end up here?" Sarah, with her constant patience, gently recounted what she had discovered. This bracelet was the only item that accompanied her when she was taken to the orphanage, the documents related to the name Emily, and even the details in Helen's story that she felt matched her own vague past. Helen didn't answer immediately, but just stared intently at the ring. She picked it up closer, her eyes welling with tears as she recognized every small detail on it, from the meticulously engraved name, Emily, to the tiny scratch on the edge, a mark she vividly remembered Emily making while playing. Helen's tears began to fall, each drop silently streaming down her wrinkled face. She exclaimed through choked sobs, "Yes, this is indeed the bracelet. This is the bracelet I gave Emily on her 5th birthday. I thought it was lost forever, along with the little girl." Helen tightly grasped the ring in her hand, feeling as if it were a piece of her heart, something she had thought she would never find again. She turned to Sarah, her eyes filled with emotion and confusion. "But how? How could you have it? I am who?" Sarah, despite trying to stay calm, her voice trembled. She looked straight at Helen and said, "Mrs. Helen, I think I am Emily, the daughter you lost all those years ago." Helen seemed frozen. Sarah's words echoed in her head, but she couldn't bring herself to believe them. How was it possible? She had lived with the pain of losing her child for so long that the thought of Emily possibly still being alive seemed like an unattainable notion. "No, it can't be," Helen whispered, shaking her head, as if trying to protect her heart from too much hope. But Sarah was not in a hurry. She calmly recounted everything she had discovered, from the necklace to the matching documents, and even the vague memories she once had of a gentle mother in a yellow dress. Helen listened, and each detail seemed to awaken memories within her. She recalled Emily's face as a child, the little girl's smile, and now, looking at Sarah, she couldn't help but notice the resemblance. Though time has passed, though Sarah's face has matured, those eyes, the bright eyes that she had watched for the first 5 years of Emily's life, remain unchanged. Helen couldn't hold back any longer. She burst into tears, pulling Sarah into her embrace. She hugged her tightly, as if afraid that if she let go, she would disappear again. "Emily, is it you? Is it really you?" "Mom has been looking for you all these years." Sarah couldn't hold back her tears either. She gently whispered, "I'm here, Mom. I have returned." In that moment, both seemed to forget everything around them. Only 2 hearts remained, once torn apart by tragedy, now beating in harmony after so many years of separation. In each other's arms, they felt something they had lost for too long: family. After the emotional confrontation, Sarah and Helen sat together, Helen's aged hand still tightly grasping Sarah's, as if fearing that this was just a dream that would vanish at any moment. In the quiet space, Sarah suddenly remembered something she had kept in her heart for a long time. "Mom." Sarah hesitated. Her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and emotion. "There is one thing I have always wondered about since I was little, but I have never found the answer. I often dream of a lullaby. I don't know where it comes from, but every time I hear it in my head, I feel strangely at peace." Helen looked at Sarah, her eyes still glistening with tears. "What lullaby, daughter?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling. Sarah pursed her lips and began to sing, each word sweet and gentle like a passing breeze, the familiar melody making Helen involuntarily shiver. That was the lullaby she used to sing to Emily every night before bed, a melody that only the 2 of them shared. Helen could no longer hold back. She burst into tears, the tears rolling down her face, which was deeply etched with the marks of time. "Emily, it's you. Mom is sure. Only you know this song. Only you." Sarah looked at Helen. Her heart felt like it was bursting. She had no more doubts. The fragmented memories she always carried with her have now found their meaning. Helen didn't wait another moment. She embraced Sarah, holding her tightly in her trembling arms. The 2 of them burst into tears, tears of pain, loss, and finally, the joy of finding each other again. Helen choked up through her sobs. "I have searched for you my whole life. Every day, I lived just to hope that you were somewhere, still alive and happy. Now, Mother needs nothing more. Now you can rest easy, Mom." Sarah hugged Helen, feeling the weak but full of love heartbeat from the mother she had unconsciously searched for all those years. "I'm here, Mom. I have come back." We will not be apart anymore. The fading afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the two of them like a blessing from time. Around them, everything seemed to stop, leaving only the joy of reunion filling the space. Helen's life, once a series of days lived in pain and regret, has now found its full meaning. Sarah, who once thought she was just a forgotten child, has now found where she belongs. Two hearts that had lost each other now beat in unison, as if the years of separation had never existed. After Helen and Sarah found each other again, their lives seemed to be illuminated by the happiness and completeness they had once dreamed of but dared not believe would come true. However, not long after that, Helen's health began to deteriorate rapidly. She became weaker, sometimes short of breath, and the pain became increasingly persistent. Sarah noticed the changes in her mother and couldn't hide her worry. She spent more time with Helen, taking care of her little by little, from small meals to helping her sit by the window to watch the late afternoon sun. Every moment Sarah spent with her was filled with love and gratitude, because she knew their time together was running out. One evening, as Sarah sat beside Helen, holding her frail hand tightly, Helen smiled gently, her eyes shining with contentment. She whispered, her voice weak but filled with tranquility, "I'm no longer afraid of death, Sarah. Mother has found you, the thing she has prayed for her entire life. As long as I know you are safe and happy, I can leave without regrets." Sarah couldn't hold back the tears. She held Helen's hand tighter, as if wanting to give her more strength, as if wanting to keep her around a little longer. Helen passed away on a peaceful morning, as the sunlight gently filtered through the curtains. She lay on the bed, with an old photo of young Emily placed on her chest, near her heart, where she had always kept the image of her daughter throughout her life. Helen's hand still held Sarah's tightly, as a message that her love would always be with her, even though she was no longer in this world. Helen departed in peace, with a gentle smile on her lips, leaving Sarah with precious memories and the boundless love she had given. Sarah felt pain, but was also comforted, knowing that her mother had left in peace, with a heart full of love and happiness upon reunion. After Helen's death, Sarah realized that her reunion with her mother was not only a miracle, but also an opportunity to turn Helen's love into a meaningful legacy for others. Sarah felt a great urge to help the lost children and the parents who had spent their whole lives searching for their children. She decided to establish a nonprofit organization named Helen's Hope, a way to honor her mother and their touching journey. Helen's Hope became a place for families who have lost each other, where they can receive legal, psychological, and technological support to find their loved ones. Sarah also expanded the organization into a network to help foster parents build loving connections with adopted children so that no child feels forgotten. Every day working at the organization, Sarah feels as if Helen is still watching over and accompanying her. The love that Helen had for her not only changed her life, but also brought hope and healing to thousands of other families. Sarah knew that Helen had passed away, but she left behind a legacy greater than anything: the strength of love, hope, and resilience. Although their lives were torn apart by tragedy, the reunion and love between the two mothers became an inspiration to turn unfinished dreams into reality for others. In every smile of the families reunited, thanks to Helen's Hope, Sarah feels a part of her mother still living on. In love, in hope, and in the journey of healing hearts that have once endured loss. The story of Helen and Sarah is a profound testament to the sacred and eternal bond of motherhood. Through the years of separation, the pain and longing seemed endless, but the love Helen had for her daughter always burned brightly, becoming the guiding light that helped her overcome every loss. Helen lived her entire life in pain that nothing could compensate. But no matter what, the love for Emily was always her greatest source of strength. That very love helped Helen persevere, never stop hoping, and ultimately brought her great comfort in her final days, to be found and reunited with her daughter. This story also reminds us that time can blur everything, but a mother's love for her child never fades. No matter how great the distance or adversity, the bond of motherhood remains a strong connection that nothing can break. After Helen passed away, Sarah not only continued to live with the love and memories her mother had given her, but also spread that legacy around the world. The organization Helen's Hope that she founded is not only a way to remember her mother, but also a symbol of hope, reunion, and the power of love. Under Sarah's leadership, Helen's Hope has helped hundreds of families reunite with loved ones who seem to be lost forever. The reunion stories, filled with tears and happiness, have proven that even in the most difficult situations, love can still find its way home. Sarah is not only the founder of the organization, but has also become a model of perseverance and unwavering faith. Those who have endured the pain of loss find empathy in her, while families reunited, thanks to her, feel hope and light. Every time Sarah looks at the logo of the organization Helen's Hope, with the image of a circle symbolizing an unbreakable bond, she remembers Helen. She understood that her story with her mother was not just a coincidence, but a reminder that love, even when tested by time and circumstances, always finds a way to return. The story ends with the image of Sarah standing on the podium at a major fundraising event of the organization. In front of hundreds of people, she smiled, her eyes shining with determination. She shared, "I was once a child who lost her family, and my mother spent her whole life searching for me. Thanks to her love, I had the opportunity to live a fulfilling life. Now, I wish to bring that love to others, so they too have the chance to find each other, just as my mother and I found each other." The applause rang out, like a recognition of Sarah and Helen's inspiring journey. Their love has overcome all difficulties, and now it has become a beacon of light for those who are lost in the journey of seeking love and reunion.